I'm Jack Fink. Welcome to a special edition of Eye on Politics from the Texas Capitol, where for the first time, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton appeared before TV cameras and Texas reporters to respond to the 20 articles of impeachment recommended against him by a Texas House committee. The Texas House is going to be considering those articles of impeachment at 1 o'clock Saturday afternoon. And Paxton sharply criticized House Speaker Dade Phelan, a fellow Republican.
By proceeding with this illegal impeachment scheme to overturn a decision made by Texas voters just a few short months ago, the corrupt politicians in the Texas House are demonstrating that blind loyalty to Speaker Dade Phelan is more important than upholding their oath of office.
Paxton did not stay and answer any of the reporters' questions. I also spoke with Republican State Representative Justin Holland of Heath, who praised the House committee overseeing the impeachment process.
I feel certain that they wouldn't be bringing something to us if it wasn't a serious matter, so I have had a chance to read the resolution, sift through the articles of impeachment, and look forward to having those discussions with other members on the floor and figuring out what the temperature for this is, and it certainly has some very far-reaching implications.
This impeachment process first came to light earlier this week. It's arguably the biggest threat to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's political career. The Texas House General Investigating Committee recommended 20 articles of impeachment against him. They voted late Thursday afternoon, one day after a team of experienced prosecutors and investigators laid out their findings against Paxton.
Chair Murr?
Aye.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Representative Guerin?
Yes.
Representative Longoria?
Yes.
Representative Spiller?
Aye.
There being 5 ayes, 0 nays, 0 present not voting, the motion prevails.
The articles of impeachment against Paxton include abuse of public trust, unfit for office, and dereliction of duty. They also include 2 articles of constitutional bribery, which accuse Paxton of benefiting from a businessman who paid for renovations to his home. He's also accused of benefiting from the same businessman's hiring of a woman who, the documents state, he had an extramarital affair with. The House committee began looking into Paxton in March after he agreed to settle a lawsuit filed against his office by whistleblowers for $3.3 million, money Paxton wanted taxpayers to pay. Those whistleblowers are 4 of his former top staffers, who he fired after they went to the FBI 2.5 years ago to make allegations of bribery against him. The articles of impeachment accuse Paxton of violating the state's whistleblower law by firing them, quote, in retaliation for reporting his illegal acts. The documents also accuse Paxton of directing, quote, employees to conduct a sham investigation into whistleblower complaints made by employees. Hours earlier, I asked Texas Senator John Cornyn, a former Texas Attorney General, what he thought about the allegations that came to light during Wednesday's hearing.
And I found what they presented to be deeply troubling.
The House committee is made up of 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats.
This is serious enough that people are looking past party labels to try to see what do we need to do to preserve the public trust and the integrity of our governing institution.
In a statement Thursday night, Paxton said in part, quote, 4 liberal lawyers put forward a report to the House General Investigating Committee based on hearsay and gossip, parroting long disproven claims. Today, that committee has asked the Texas House of Representatives to use their unsubstantiated report to overturn the results of a free and fair election. Paxton said the committee didn't allow representatives from his office to testify with their side of the story. If the House impeaches Paxton, he will be suspended from his job immediately, pending the outcome of a trial by the Texas Senate, where a 2/3 vote is required to remove him from office. His wife, Angela Paxton, represents much of Collin County in the Senate. Governor Greg Abbott could appoint an interim attorney general until the outcome of the trial. And we will be inside the Texas House chamber as lawmakers debate and vote whether to impeach Paxton. We'll have the latest on CBS News Texas. Coming up a little later, we'll hear from Representative Harrison on a variety of issues, from property tax reform, school choice, and COVID vaccine mandates. Plus a conversation with Congressman Keith Self of McKinney over negotiations on raising the debt ceiling and budget cuts. But next, Uvalde, 1 year later, how the Texas legislature has responded when it comes to making schools safer. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. After last year's massacre in Uvalde, we reported the state had no authority to make sure school districts comply with safety and security requirements. But a bill is advancing in the legislature that will change that. After the deadly mass shooting at Robb Elementary School, state lawmakers are advancing bills that would ensure school districts across Texas comply with new safety and security requirements.
This is a big bill, probably one of the most important things we do.
Members of the House and Senate wrote bills to address major shortcomings found after the tragedy. The gunman at Robb Elementary School entered the building through an unlocked door. During a state Senate hearing last summer, it became clear there wasn't a way to enforce compliance of existing safety rules. The director of the School Safety Center told lawmakers they couldn't do on-site safety inspections at school campuses.
Not clear on our authority to be able to go and do compliance follow-up checks.
Now lawmakers are set to give the Texas Education Agency, or TEA, the authority to conduct on-site safety and security audits. That includes checking to see if doors and windows are locked and whether a stranger can get into a school.
And that's when I issued that directive.
Governor Greg Abbott ordered these inspections after Uvalde. The Texas School Safety Center would also have to review each school campus once every 5 years and make recommendations on potential changes to meet safety standards. School districts will have to comply with all of these requirements. If they don't, they'll have time to make corrections under a deadline. Lawmakers asked the author of the Senate's bill if the legislation requires school districts to comply.
I guess my question is, do you feel like you've got adequate teeth, so to speak, in the bill with regard to enforcement?
I believe we have. If they're in non-compliance, they basically get a certain period of time to correct it. But if they don't correct it, then the state will step in, not to take over the whole school system, but the state will step in just on the school safety compliance portion. We want you to be in compliance. We're going to give you every chance. We're going to give you every help. And if you're not, the state's going to step in and we're going to get you in compliance.
But the public needs to know, our parent needs to know that their school district or their administrators and their board of trustees is not taking it serious.
Members. Democratic State Senator Royce West proposed his own bill that would require accountability. His bill would have established a system to rate each school district as either meets standards or does not meet standards, but it failed to pass this legislative session. Lawmakers say they believe these safety requirements will work, but there are incentives just to make sure. If there's a school district that's not compliant, students there would be able to attend classes in a different district. And if a superintendent is fired because the district isn't in compliance, the Board of Trustees won't be able to pay that superintendent any severance. A committee of lawmakers from the House and Senate are negotiating the final language of the legislation. As we've reported this session, there have been calls for new gun reform bills from families of the victims in Uvalde and other citizens. At the Capitol, one of the most outspoken lawmakers on gun reform is Democratic State Senator Roland Gutierrez, who represents Uvalde.
Vast majority of Texans want to have common sense gun safety solutions.
From the Texas Capitol to the nation's capital.
May 24th was the worst law enforcement response, one of the worst school shootings in our nation's history.
Democratic State Senator Roland Gutierrez of San Antonio has become one of the most vocal critics of the law enforcement response to the massacre at Robb Elementary School and to Governor Greg Abbott's gun policies that he blames for causing it.
Every time something happens, it's something else, and he's got a solution for this that's not related to the common denominator, which is guns.
In the years since the Uvalde shooting, Gutierrez says he's become close to the families of the victims.
We are not done.
Earlier this month, the senator led a 45-minute news conference featuring those families who urged Republican leaders to pass a gun reform bill. The Uvalde gunman bought his guns legally at the age of 18.
Is it just raise the age limit to purchase assault-style weapons from 18 to 21?
Despite their efforts, that bill failed to make it to the full House for a debate and vote. Gutierrez told me none of his gun safety bills received a hearing in the Senate, including a raise the age bill, universal background checks, and red flag laws.
Listen, it's very clear where the Republicans are in their position on gun reform. They don't want any.
But why not have a debate?
Because they're afraid of the debate.
During the past year, a variety of Texas polls have shown support for more gun restrictions, including by Republicans. But the Republican majorities in the legislature don't support that. When we spoke with Gutierrez earlier this month, he said he was still trying to get the House's raise the age bill passed in the Senate.
Without infringing on anybody's rights.
Late last week, Gutierrez tried one last time to add an amendment to another gun-related bill that would have kept 18 to 20-year-olds from buying AR-style firearms. He told senators how difficult it was to watch all of the police and school camera videos from that dark day.
What I saw was bodies just riddled. Blood everywhere. You've never seen so much blood in your life.
The Senate rejected Gutierrez's amendment, saying it wasn't relevant to the bill being debated.
I know that this has struck you very hard. We talked about that in our office at the beginning of session.
While Gutierrez hasn't achieved legislative success this session, he has raised his profile and acknowledged he's considering a run for U.S. Senate against Republican Ted Cruz.
Probably closer to July, I'll make those decisions.
Governor Abbott has emphasized hardening schools, safety checks and audits at school campuses, and improving mental health programs for schools and communities across Texas. He remains opposed to new gun reform legislation. You can watch more of our coverage on Uvalde 1 year later on our website, cbsnewstexas.com. And coming up, we continue our conversation with State Representative Brian Harrison about the end of the legislative session and property tax relief, school choice, and COVID vaccine mandates. And we interview Congressman Keith Self about negotiations in Washington, D.C. over raising the debt ceiling and budget cuts. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas returns in a moment. At the Texas Capitol, the regular legislative session enters its final weekend as lawmakers are negotiating some of the priority bills, including property tax relief and whether to eliminate DEI offices and programs at state universities and colleges. We continue now our conversation with State Representative Brian Harrison of Waxahachie about these issues and more. How do you think that's going to shake out? Because the Senate's going to have to decide whether to go along with those House amendments.
Yeah, and I hope the Senate holds the line and stands strong and does what 30 million Texans want. Right now, when Texans are having a hard time putting food on the table and gas in the tank or paying their property tax bills, they want to know that their taxpayer dollars, their hard-earned money, is not being spent to promote this cancerous DEI on college campuses. And I guarantee you, there's not one Texan that would support permanent job security for these highly paid DEI faculty and staff that are pushing this cancerous ideology into institutions all across the state of Texas. We must do that. And I hope in the conference committee, the Senate stands strong and allows us to pass a bill that permanently bans DEI here in the great state of Texas.
Well, what do you say to those who say diversity is important and that there needs to be this so that people of all backgrounds have a fair shot?
Well, it sounds profound, to say diversity is important, but it's axiomatically true. Of course, diversity is important. Diversity exists whether we have taxpayer money promoting racist ideology or not. And in fact, we have data from Texas A&M that their diversity programs have in fact backfired after spending millions and millions of dollars promoting this ideology and these policies, which, by the way, are in fact racist, because they do the exact antithesis of what Dr. Martin Luther King said, which is we are focusing on people's skin color instead of the content of their character. And we now know, after years of data from Texas A&M, that African Americans on campus actually feel less a part of the campus community than they did before we were spending millions of dollars on these racist policies. So I'm tired of the platitudes that sound great, but they just sound great and they only function as a cover to put taxpayer-funded racism into our universities. And I will do everything in my power to end that.
You brought up property tax reform, and the House and the Senate have been on different tracks on this, but the House last week passed an updated version that does both of what the House and the Senate have asked for. So it would be lowering the cap from 10 to 5% on taxable value of properties, not just residential, but of all properties. And then it would boost the homestead exemption to even more than what the Senate called for. So where are you on this bill, and how confident are you that something's going to get done?
Well, I do think something's going to get done. The question is it as good and as big and as robust as our taxpayers deserve? Look, I voted for that bill, and I'll vote for either package that makes its way to my desk, because my constituents are suffering. I mean, literally, the Texans who have been responsible, they have paid off their mortgages. They are being taxed out of their homes all across the state of Texas, even sometimes properties that have been in their family for generations. So I'll support either of these bills, but I'll be very honest and candid. Neither of them go as far as I think we should be going. I think that state legislature in the state of Texas needs to do the right thing and put us on a path to finally eliminate this unethical property tax system that precludes any homeowner from ever truly owning their home. I want more focus on the tax rate side. I want tax rates going down to as close to zero, if not zero, as we possibly can get it. We can do it, but we need bold leadership. And we're not even breaking the spending cap, because we call tax cuts government spending. Only in government, by the way, is a tax cut a spending increase. That kind of insanity needs to be pushed to the side. We need to spend every penny that we have remaining that's unallocated of that surplus and throw it towards getting our property tax rates down as close to zero as possible. I filed a bill to do that. I filed a constitutional amendment to do that, because property taxes are inconsistent with private property rights. They're unethical. And I look forward to the day that they are in the rearview mirror in the state of Texas.
You brought up COVID and vaccine mandates, and I know there was a Senate bill that was a priority, Senate Bill 29, that passed in both the House and the Senate, but it stopped short, right, of as far as banning vaccine mandates for private businesses. Is that right? So
yeah, there only was one bill filed this entire legislative session that would have comprehensively banned COVID mandates in the state of Texas. And it was a bill that I authored and introduced over a year and a half ago called the Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act. Again, the only bill that would end a single COVID vaccine mandate that is intact today. SB 29 is a fine bill, but it doesn't turn off one single mandate that exists today. And that's unfortunate. The Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act, I partnered with Senator Mays Middleton, who was successful in getting that through the Texas Senate expeditiously. And unfortunately, it was sent over here to the Texas House to do something that our constituents demand and deserve, and that's to protect their medical freedom, their medical liberty, to prevent Texans from being fired if they don't accept a COVID vaccine that maybe they don't need, that maybe could be harmful for them. But the Texas House leadership chose to not even allow that bill to be debated on the floor of the House. The Texas House made the conscious decision to protect COVID vaccine mandates in the state of Texas, possibly forever, and to continue allowing Texans to be fired if they are not forcibly vaccinated against COVID-19. It's indefensible. Medical liberty is a line in the sand issue. If you actually believe in liberty, I don't think you can have freedom if you don't have medical freedom. And so if we get through this session and in fact do not pass the Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act, which again, it's too late, they wouldn't even put it on the floor for debate, then I think the governor should do the right thing and bring us back for a special session so that we can actually protect medical freedom for 30 million Texans.
I was going to ask you about that, because that was one of his emergency items.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, have you had conversations with his office about this? Because Senate Bill 29, at least my understanding was, doesn't allow government entities to require vaccine mandates, right? So
that's correct. Senate Bill 29, while it's fine and I happily voted for it, there is not one COVID vaccine or any other COVID mandate that exists in the state of Texas today that bill will deal with. It's just true. It's just on government mandates, which don't exist in Texas. So what I hope is not the case, is that we take Senate Bill 29 and then just declare victory and say that we got rid of COVID mandates in the state of Texas, because that is not true. You can go on countless employers' websites right now. You can go to CVS's website right now. And if you're in Texas, they brag about it on their website. You get a vaccine or you get fired. And you know, that's the kind of medical freedom, or the attacks on medical freedom, these tyrannical COVID vaccine mandates that the Texas COVID vaccine mandate would have solved for Texans. But unfortunately, Texas House leadership chose to protect COVID vaccine mandates.
Last question. I know we're going a little long, but school choice. How do you think this is going to shake out?
Well, you're perhaps ending with what could be arguably the most important issue that we have also so far failed on. I believe that education freedom, just like medical freedom, I believe in all the freedoms, okay? Education freedom, I think, is the civil rights era of our time. We right now in the state of Texas have an education system that is failing too many students, and especially too many disenfranchised students, people with low socioeconomic standings, the poor. They are trapped in schools that are not educating them. Right now in the state of Texas, Jack, a lot of people don't know this. Only 24% of Texas eighth graders can read on grade level. Only 28% or 24% of Texas eighth graders can do math at grade level. We are failing a generation of children. And what do we say to like the single working mother in a place like Austin ISD, where not even 20% of their kids are fully proficient, who wants nothing more than for their child to have the one thing that may be the most important variable for that kid's success, and that's a quality education. If we force her to stay trapped in a system that is not teaching them English and mathematics, but is spending her tax dollars to bring in drag queens for drag queen library hours and Pride Week, no. We can do better. We must do better. We must finally put parents in control of their children's education. One-size-fits-all government solutions never work best for everybody. The public schools are going to be improved by this, by having to actually compete for education outcomes. Let's put parents in the driver's seat. Let them put their child in the school that is best suited for the individual needs of their particular and unique child. And that way we can do the single most important thing for the next generation and guarantee every child in the state of Texas a quality of education. So if we continue to fail on getting that done in the regular session, which looks likely, I hope the governor keeps his word and calls us back. I don't care if we have to be here until the next session in 2025, if that's what it takes to give every family education freedom so that every student can receive a quality education.
Republican State Representative Brian Harrison of Waxahachie, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Always great to be with you, Jack.
Likewise. Thank you. We will have reaction from Democratic lawmakers on the state legislative session next week. Now to Washington, D.C. and our conversation with Republican Congressman Keith Self of McKinney about negotiations over raising the debt ceiling and budget cuts. Where do things stand on as it relates to negotiations over the debt ceiling and budget?
Well, as far as I know, nothing has changed. The House passed a bill. For 100 days, the president refused to discuss anything with us. So we passed a bill, a very strong bill, the Limit, Save, and Grow bill. And I have heard nothing officially since. I believe they're in discussions, but from what I'm hearing, not much progress has been made.
And so how concerned are you that there could be a default in which the U.S. can't pay all of its bills?
Well, there's not going to be a default because June is the second highest month for tax revenues. So in any case, we will be able to pay the interest on the debt, Social Security, Medicare, and defense with no problem whatsoever. No default.
And so if I'm not mistaken, where the Democrats are right now is as far as cutting spending as opposed to holding the line and freezing 2022 spending. What's your take on where things stand right now? Republicans want cuts. Democrats would just assume freeze.
Well, in 2011, the S&P said that they downgraded the credit rating of the United States not because they were close to a default, but because they failed to handle the spending. You may have heard that Fitch just put out a statement that said they're considering downgrading the United States right now because they are concerned that we will not tackle fiscal challenges that could lead to rising budget deficits and a growing debt burden, which could lead to risks to the U.S. credit worthiness. That's today. That's what Fitch just said.
And so what, if you had your way, what would you like to see as far as cuts? And I would imagine you're talking about discretionary spending, right? So you're not talking about entitlements, and you're not talking about military.
What I want to see is what's in the Limit, Save, Grow Act. we have put forth reasonable, sensible cuts to the budget of the United States in exchange for a very small increase in the debt ceiling over a short period of time. But we must get control of the spending. There's a CNN poll out that says that 60% of Americans agree with the Republicans that we need to have responsible spending cuts in exchange for any debt ceiling increase.
Have you had a chance to talk with your Democratic colleagues about this, and what are they telling you?
I've not talked to any Democrats about it. We had a very rousing time on the floor of the House last evening when the leader, Steve Scalise, said that we might be coming back next week, and we had a rousing exchange of party sentiment, shall we say, on the floor of the House.
And what about work requirements? I understand that that's one of the sticking points by Democrats.
Well, there are two that I think are probably going to be meaningful to the Democrats. Work requirements are certainly one, and history will tell you, Jack, that if we have work requirements, it adds to the workforce. People get a job. I've always said the best social program is a job. The other one, excuse me, the other one is the climate subsidies and the Inflation Reduction Act, so-called Inflation Reduction Act, that basically is funding all of the progressive left policies. So yes, it's dollars, but it's also the ability to change the policy in those areas. So that's very important.
So the Republicans are seeking changes to that act.
Absolutely. We are seeking to repeal some of the subsidies for the hardcore progressive left projects that are in that bill. Absolutely. And we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars.
And any specifics you can share with us as far as which particular programs?
Oh, the list is so long. I mean, a lot of it is the war on fossil fuels. A lot of it is climate related, which will kill the energy industry in America. That's the big issue. As we do away with these policies, these subsidies, we will energize the fossil fuel industry in the United States, which will lower inflation and create jobs, because energy is the basis of civilization today. We must have energy, and we must have reliable energy. And wind and solar are just not that. Texans know that. We had a disaster, both one hot and one cold in the last few years. We know that renewable energy is just not reliable energy.
And my last question to you is, what impact do you think this would have if the Congress does agree to not only, raise the debt ceiling, but to cut the budget? What impact would that have on the inflation that all Americans have been feeling for the last year and a half?
I think it would reduce it, because this gets us back to fiscal sanity. Why do we have inflation? We've dumped $10 trillion into the economy over the last few years. That's where inflation is coming from. It's coming from the money that's been added to the economy. So we start soaking that out of the economy. This will do a better job than any rate increase that the Fed's trying. This will get us back on the road to fiscal sanity. Jack, we have a republic to save here. We are absolutely, totally out of control with our spending. There have been Republican majorities for the last 16 of the last 22 years, and yet we've gone from 10 trillion in debt to 32 trillion. This Republican majority is united, and I believe that the Republican unity in this subject has been the one thing that has changed this city in the last few years.
Congressman Keith Self of McKinney, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We were set to speak with Democratic Congressman Mark Vesey of Fort Worth, but he had to reschedule. We hope to interview him next week on the debt ceiling and budget talks. That's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jack Fink. You're watching CBS News Texas.